expecting Selena at some point.
Okay, great.
You are all.
We're all set. Thank you. Thank you, John. And we have 3 candidates here now, as well as a quorum of the board. So if we can start off with everybody off mute for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the
republic for which it
Republic
stands,
which it
one
stands,
nation,
one
under
nation,
God,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
and
and justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you all. So tonight is a special meeting. We will be interviewing 3 different candidates tonight for our vacancy since Ken has departed. We will have first candidate at 6:15, second at 6:30, and third at 6:45. As with tradition on this board, we will all candidates will be asked the same set of questions by this board, and as also per history and politeness, we ask that the candidates don't watch the portion where the other candidates are answering their questions. Everybody will be in the waiting room at that point, but we just ask that you offer that privacy to the other candidates during that time. Then after the third candidate meets with us, we will convene an executive session and discuss amongst ourselves who, if anybody, to appoint to the vacancy. And then we'll come back in public session to make that appointment. Before we begin, I would like to invite the representative from the DTC to say a few words about the candidate that they have endorsed. As this was a Democrat seat that was vacated, it is up to the DTC to provide us with an endorsement. And all 3 candidates that we meet with will be registered Democrats. But let's take a moment to hear from Karina. It's going to be Joe, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Joe.
As is the DTC's tradition, I think the person making this presentation will be the chair of the DTC's recruitment subcommittee. And I assumed that position in March of this year. So I worked to help recruit candidates. We, as a subcommittee, interviewed, spent a good bit of time interviewing candidates. We actually got 2 candidates who we interviewed. We brought them both to the full 24-member DTC, the great majority of whom were present for our meeting, Zoom meeting, and we spent a good bit of time with the candidates and in discussions afterwards. And we were very, very fortunate, and I hope the board considers themselves very, very fortunate to find that one of the people who applied for the job is Wyatt Lipman. Wyatt really, really impressed us, the subcommittee members who met with him, the 24 DTC members, and we were very pleased to endorse him and recommend him to the Board of Education to fill this Democratic vacancy. Just a bit more about the process. We understand the nature of the process that the Board of Education goes through. We feel and we felt that our process is a somewhat longer and more intense one just because we have the time to do it. And so that's why we often end up feeling, a good sense of where we come out when we finally make that recommendation. So we really believe that we found an outstanding person to join the Board of Education who has the kinds of qualifications that the board would be looking for. Terrific academic and job qualifications, excellence in his experience, a willingness to listen and engage, and someone who showed real talents in doing that throughout our process, someone who certainly came across as a consensus builder, and the nature of whose work in reaching contracts on a high level with many people through negotiations and give and take and driving results means he has to do that. So we really thought that Wyatt Lippman has those qualities. And we were impressed with him on a personal level. I mean, he moved to Ridgefield with his wife 2 years ago. They have a young daughter. And I and others around here have seen an enormous influx of people in these past couple of years. And I think Wyatt really typifies and represents sort of the best of that group of people who have come here and just truly embraced Ridgefield as their home. And really, as we're going to see in upcoming years, becoming the future, an important part of the future of Ridgefield. And I think the board will see that among the 9 board members, having someone so talented and interested and dedicated to this town, who came to this town rather recently, will turn out to be a tremendous benefit. Wyatt brought his parents to this town. Wyatt and his wife have made enormous connections in this town, as I well understand. I moved here 42 years ago with the first of my children, who was then a 1-year-old, and I could assure you that 2 years is an intense time to make connections in a town, and I know that Wyatt has made those kinds of connections. So I think he will, in addition, bring to the board the kind of perspective that someone in this new and large cohort that's going to be contributing to the school system can bring. Another thing that particularly impressed us about Wyatt is that he demonstrated a commitment to education. I mean, while his career has been in corporate law at the highest levels, he, as a volunteer, serves on the New York area region board of the leadership council of a nonprofit called Bottom Line, whose focus is on public education and working to improve the educational opportunities of first generation income people who can be bound for college. And it's, Wyatt didn't have to do that. He did that out of the same commitment that I think brings him before the Board of Education tonight. We submitted a letter. You're going to, which I presume is with all your board materials. Karina submitted it. We really respect his skill sets. We know sometimes from past experience that the Board of Education likes to balance a series of, let's say, either life experiences or skill sets to bring to the board. And one thing that impressed me about Wyatt is working on negotiating contracts is a tremendously useful skill. I mean, that's sort of one area of law. There are other areas of law, but someone who is an expert on that can shed a lot of light on the kinds of processes that the Board of Education and the administration of this school district go through all the time in achieving the best results effectively and efficiently for the town of Ridgefield. And I'm sure he's eager to do that, as well as contributing all his other skills, judgment, and enthusiasm. So with that, I'll just finally say it is with real enthusiasm that the Democratic Town Committee recommends and endorses Wyatt Lippman as the next member of the Ridgefield Board of Education. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you this evening.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so next, before we start meeting with the individual candidates, everybody has had access to the list of questions that Tina compiled for us earlier. I just want to go through the board members here and make sure that they have a question ready to answer. Rachel, I see you. Your first selection, you can go with that. Tina, do you have one in mind for yourself?
I was waiting for everyone else to choose. So go through the list and I'll be the last because
Sure.
I was the one.
Sean, it looks like your first choice is still available, so we'll leave you with that one. Tom, did you have one in mind that you wanted to ask of our candidates?
Number 5?
Number 5. Got it. Okay. Amy, I see that you selected. Where are you? Number 4. And Selena, your first choice was number 13. Liz, were you able to get into the document? I don't know that she can hear us. Liz, if you are speaking, you're on mute, but if you're able to get into the document and select a question, that'd be great. Otherwise, I think we're good to go, and we will just go through this based on question number. So Rachel, your question number 1 will be the first one asked. Amy, you're number 4. Thomas, you're number 5. I'll take the next one. I'm number 10. Tina, you're 11. Selena, 13. So that'll be the order, and we'll just stick with the same order and the same list of questions for every candidate in the interest of fairness for all. And anybody have any questions before we move on? Tom, I do want to state that I did receive your email, and I understand that you do wish that there was more time for these interviews, and I totally understand that thought process. We don't have the time to make that change tonight, but I do want to let you know that that was a heartfelt, and we do understand that your thoughts there.
Thank you.
All right, right on time. We're going to ask candidates 2 and 3 to be moved into the waiting room. And we will start off with candidate number 1. And this order is based on the time that we received the letter of interest. So the first one up will be Michael Veluso.
So I think, Jonathan, if you can just hang on 1 second, you can either leave on your own, or we will move you into the waiting room in just a second. And cabinet will be leaving as well, Jonathan.
Great.
We'll see you back in a little bit. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Can we start with that?
We can hear you.
All right, good. We're on vacation in Acadia National Park, and part of my process today after driving up here was to find some Wi-Fi. So here we are. So I appreciate it.
You are all set on the Wi-Fi.
Good.
Give us a minute to make sure we have the right group in front of you. And as soon as Mr. Shapiro is moved into the waiting room, we'll be good to go. Terrific. Okay, Michael.
Yeah.
Welcome. This can be trying. A few of the people in front of you have gone through the same process for appointments to the board. So we might know a little bit about how you're feeling tonight. We appreciate your letter and sending in your background. And we're going to start off, like I said in the earlier session, each of us will ask 1 question, and then we'll move on. So it's going to be a total of 7 questions, unless Liz has been able to get her Wi-Fi to work. So 7 or 8 questions. We've got about 15 minutes. If we run long, we run long. But with that, we can move right in, and we'll start with Rachel Ruggieri's question.
Good evening, Michael. I'm
Hi.
Rachel Ruggieri. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
So first question is, why do you want to be on the Board of Education? And what do you think will be your biggest challenge serving on the Board of Ed?
So let me tell you the story as concisely as I can. I know it's in the interest of time, but I grew up next door in Danbury, Connecticut, and having grown up there and gone to Danbury public high schools, and then spending a lot of my time out west. We lived in Arizona for about 10 years. And so you got to see a little bit of a difference in how different towns or cities approach public education. And one of the things that's a stark contrast to what we had seen relative to Richfield is the treatment of it as an investment versus a cost. And for me, when the time came for us to decide kind of where we wanted to settle when we were living out in Arizona, we decided to move back here. And the choice between Danbury and Richfield became one about schools. We really did our research. and ended up in Ridgefield as a result of that choice. Since then, my wife's been involved with the Farmingville PTA as the president, and we've had many discussions about education and the educational system and what we can do on behalf of the kids. That's kind of where my motivation lies to be involved. It's all about what we can do to make this investment continue to be strong on behalf of the kids. And as far as challenges, I think for me, it's acclimating to the culture of a new organization, something I've done in my professional career, moving across the country 5 different times, and understanding how the dynamics are so that we can get some things done collaboratively.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Next question will be asked by Amy Casey.
Excuse me.
Hi, Mike. I'm wondering, what did you most enjoy and value in your current or your past community service?
In my past community service, so I've done a couple of things. But out west, we volunteered with a local church out there, and it was meeting people of different backgrounds, quite frankly. One of the neat things is being able to participate with people who you might have a divergent opinion on some things about, but can come together for a common cause. And in this case, it was community service. And it was random projects that were selected, from something as trivial as go help an elderly citizen tidy up their yard, to volunteering at a food pantry. But what we realized was you can get together with people who you might have difference of opinions on some things, but come together when it really matters for the important stuff.
Next question on the docket here is from Thomas Collin.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for your interest.
Sure.
Making time during your vacation.
Yeah.
Question, where do you think that politics plays a role as a member of the Board of Ed?
It's a good question and timely. The answer is, I think when politics interferes with the end result of what are we doing on behalf of kids, then politics has become too much of an interference on the decision making. If the conversation devolves into politics versus what we're doing on behalf of the kids, I think it's not helpful or beneficial to the end mission on what we need to do to support the educational system here. That being said, it's impossible now sometimes for politics not to creep in, but I think I would quote Abraham Lincoln when he said, "I don't like this man, I must get to know him better." It's one of the lessons that I've sort of taught my team at work on sometimes how we deal with external stakeholders who we don't see eye to eye with. And that's one of the things I would bring to the table here. I think the focus needs to always be on, are we talking about the kids, or are we talking about something that doesn't impact them at all, and really refocus on that stuff.
Next question will be asked by Sean McAvoy.
Hey, Mike, good to see you.
Hey.
So my question is, what do you see as the board's roles and responsibilities? And conversely, what work of the school district is not the board's role?
So I would say the board's role, in any board really, I've served on a couple of nonprofit boards more in the corporate setting than not, but the role of the board is to work with the executive to help craft the agenda and the priorities, and work in tandem to hold each other accountable for making sure that those things are executed on, and that the stakeholders of the town, that is the families and the kids especially, are balanced in the conversations towards that end.
Thank you.
Okay, I will take the next question. What do you see as both the strengths and weaknesses of this Board of Education? Do you think that the public understands the role of the BOE, or do they believe it to be different than what it actually is? And if so, in what ways?
I think that the public lacks an understanding of the deliberations of the Board of Ed, and you can gauge that by either turnout in elections sometimes or by general interaction. I think we should do a better job of getting more people enrolled in the business of the board, quite frankly. I don't think a lot of people understand in our town much of anything relative to the board. I think it's a small segment of people who actively go out of their way to try to be informed on what the business of the board is. And I think that's certainly a bit of a weakness. And if there's a way to communicate better with the public, I think that might make sense. There's people like me who don't do a lot on social media. And so I get my information or points of view by just talking to a lot of people. But I think that's a lost art sometimes. But I think there's a lot more people like me who have that point of view and want to see a larger swath of the community take a more active interest in what the Board of Ed is doing to provide, I don't know, because they have a stake in the game, quite frankly. But gosh, I think that's an opportunity for improvement in terms of communication.
Thank you. Tina Malhotra has the next question for you.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for your interest.
Yeah,
And thank you for taking time out of your vacation.
that's fine.
My question is really simple. Is there any particular issue or agenda that you come with or that motivates you to serve on the Board of Education?
There's a couple of things. I think we'll start with special education. I think I grew up in a pretty unique family. My mother spent her professional career in special ed in the Danbury school system with a focus on birth to 3 kids. So she spent the majority of her time in some of the toughest neighborhoods in Danbury, working with some of the neediest kids, helping diagnose autism and various things to families who did not have a lot of means for support. And so for me, one issue would be making sure that we invest early in our kids for whatever their needs might be. That's a real strength of Richfield relative to Danbury, quite frankly, and making sure that that is both strong and continues to be a strength and refined upon is important for me. I think other things that get me interested in participating here would be how can we prepare the kids for a life that is well-rounded and where they can be world citizens that are informed and exposed to new opportunities. And so what we can do to support maybe a broader educational opportunity, whether that's in the arts or in world languages or other things that are vitally important, I think, moving forward to make sure that our kids are well prepared to be citizens, whatever they choose to do post high school, quite frankly. But that's sort of where I'm coming at it from those two perspectives. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next question is going to be from Selena Bell.
Hi, Mike. I hope you're having fun. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
My question is this, just looking at the climate right now, what do you consider to be the current challenges facing education and school boards today?
Well, I think education in general is twofold. I think number one is funding. I think making sure that educational opportunities and priorities are well thought out and budgeted for. I think one of the adverse impacts on boards of ed is sometimes you can hear, whether it's locally or in other places, that sometimes the focus is less on kids and more on other things that are happening, whether it's nationally or not. And I'm not immune to that. It's not stuff that's unimportant, but at the end of the day, I think priorities of the boards are an important thing to talk about. And so refocusing that on kids is where my head would be and my focus would be, about understanding that maybe toning down some of the lack of civility. This is nationally, by the way. I don't know that I'm participative enough on Facebook locally to speak to it here, but I think nationally, toning down some of the lack of civility in favor of collaboration for the kids is important.
Yeah, thank you. I don't believe Liz's connection is giving her the ability to ask another question of you, but we do have just a couple of minutes left. So I ask you if there's anything that you'd like this board to know that
Yeah.
was not covered in either your resume or your letter of interest or these questions. You've got a few minutes to speak with us now.
Thanks. I think one of the unique things I bring to the table is the fact that my life professionally has spanned different geographies and different companies where it's been incumbent upon me to collaborate effectively with people that I didn't know, have different life experiences, different backgrounds, different political points of view. I've done that in the South, out West, in between. And I think what I come away with from that experience is the ability to collaborate with people effectively and make sure that you get to know people on a human level so that you can be more effective in working with them. And my resume kind of bears that out in how I've moved around the country. And when we came back here to Richfield, it was really a desire to be a part of this community. And I want to have skin in the game here. I've got 3 kids in the system, 1 at East Ridge, 7th grader coming up, and 2 at Farmingville. And so we're going to be here for a bit. And I want to have a stake in what's going to be their future. And I look forward to the consideration. I really appreciate it so far. Thank you, everybody, for the time.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to ask you to move to the waiting room.
Do I have to do that, or could somebody just bump me over there?
I think we can have somebody. It's done. Consider it done. And we can invite in our next candidate.
Which one would you like?
That next candidate is Wyatt Lippman. Hi, Wyatt, and welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan.
As I said in the earlier portion of the evening, we're each going to ask you one question. All the candidates are being asked the same questions by the same board members in the interest of fairness. We have about 15 minutes. If it goes over, it goes over. At the end, you'll have a few moments to speak to anything that was not covered in the questions. So moving right in, our first question this evening will be asked by Rachel Ruggieri.
Good evening, Wyatt. I'm Rachel. Welcome. So first question, why do you want to be on the Board of Education? And what do you think will be your biggest challenge serving on the Board of Ed?
Thank you so much for the question, Rachel. And let me just start by thanking all of you for giving me the time and the chance to introduce myself and to spend a little time connecting with you tonight to talk about why I want to serve. You know, my wife, Maria, and I moved to Richfield particularly because of the strong schools, to grow our family here. We really admired how Richfield values and invests in education, and that's a core value that we share. And you see it in the yard signs and bumper stickers that folks have announcing their family's pride in neighborhood elementary schools. We saw that right away. And for us, you know, schools really are the heart of a community that we want to be a part of, an economic engine that brings people to a town to stay, to grow families and build businesses. And really, it's the most worthy investment that a community can make. That's my own family's story. My father, Steve, spent his whole career as an educator, first in public high school in Watertown, Massachusetts, and for 40 years as a faculty member and in the administration at Berklee College of Music in Boston. My mother, Marilyn, worked in nonprofit education, and you know, it was their sacrifice and their emphasis on education that got me where I am today. So now for my own daughter, Maria and I have decided to plant roots here in Richfield and for Vivienne to go to school here and build a life around growing and raising our family here. So we're going to be here for a long time. My folks have picked up and moved to town to be near us. And so I seek to serve on the board to do everything that I can to sustain and strengthen Richfield's school system. You know, as part of this new future-focused cohort who've joined this community, I feel it is incredibly important to serve it. I've considered this decision. I've talked about it with friends and with neighbors and family, and I want to make a significant ongoing commitment to this mission. It really seems to be the most important kind of work that I can do to contribute to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question will be asked by Amy Casey.
Hi, Wyatt. I'm Amy Casey. Thank you for being here. My question to you is, what did you most enjoy and value in your current or your past community service?
Oh, thank you for the question, Amy. And if I might, I actually realized that I left out my answer to part B of the first question, which is the challenge that I might find in serving this role. So if I could just ask for a moment to go back and just reflect on that piece, which I would say maintaining strong connections to all of the stakeholders, meaning the superintendent and her wonderful staff, teachers, parents, and others in the community, so I can keep a line of sight into what's happening on the ground. My daughter Vivian is only 10 months old. I know in the blink of an eye she'll be at Branchville Elementary School, but I think it'll be incredibly important from the outset that I roll up my sleeves and listen and get that intel that I need to understand with specificity what's happening in our schools on the ground. So thank you for letting me go back to that. As for your great question, Amy, Joe mentioned that I'm on the leadership council for a nonprofit organization called Bottom Line, which is committed to improving educational opportunities and outcomes for low income and first generation college-bound students. It is incredibly gratifying to do this work and to be a bridge for folks, for families who've not had access to, not only access to college, but the tools to and resources to be successful, to graduate and to launch careers. And that's not to say that college is the only path, but for those for whom it can be a path to the working world and to success in the working world, this is a group of folks that needs folks on their side, needs help to be that bridge. And so it's just an incredibly gratifying organization to commit my time to.
Thank you. Next question will be coming from Thomas Collin.
Hi, Wyatt. Thanks for your interest and for joining us. Question: where do you think politics plays a role as a member of the Board of Ed?
Thanks for the question, Thomas. You know, I'd say we all well know the adage, all politics is local, but you know, in my view, not everything local needs to be political. Of course, look, these are human institutions, so there's going to be politics, but really, I would come to this role focusing on collaboration and through the lens of politics as the way that we confer and decide what we're going to do together. What are the priorities? What are the objectives that as a community we think are important? And having that exchange is inherently political, but I don't think it needs to be driven by that political tenor. I think it should be done, that work should be done through a perspective of listening first, of trying to understand, and of trying at all times to serve the interests of students, which should be the North Star for our decision making. There should not be a preconceived agenda, political agenda, or set of issues that any one of us, if I'm lucky enough to join you on the board, ought to be driving forward. It should be the interests of students guiding our decision making in collaboration with each other.
Thank you.
Next question will be asked by Sean McAvoy.
Good evening, Wyatt. So my question is, what do you see as the board's roles and responsibilities? And conversely, what work of the school district is not the board's responsibility?
The first question, I think, is relatively straightforward. I think the role of the Board of Education is governance. It's a governing board, which means a fiduciary duty to direct the management of the school system in accordance with district priorities and legal obligations. It means that the board's decisions are binding. Policy, budget oversight, collaboration with the superintendent, and representing the interests of the community and the interests of students above all else. I think that's the core set of responsibilities of the Board of Education. What is not the role of the board? I think everything else that's not included in governance, in policy, in budget oversight, in a relationship with the superintendent, and in representing the community. So touching on the answer to our last question, I think bringing preconceived policy, political agenda to the table. I think micromanaging educational experts who've devoted their careers to professional education. I think those are parts of those are activities that I don't think are core to the role of a board.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have the next question. What do you see as both the strengths and weaknesses of this Board of Education? Do you think that the public understands the role of the BOE, or do they believe it to be different than what it actually is? And if so, in what ways?
Incredibly interesting question. Thank you. I think that look, this board has been operating during an incredibly challenging period with COVID, and so I don't know that it's fair for anyone to take a evaluation or public assessment of what this board might be able to have achieved in another context, right? We've all been laboring in incredibly challenging times and had to find our resiliency and creativity. I think in terms of what can be improved, I think communication with the public, with the community, is something that's always capable of being strengthened and is core to what the board's mission should be. Both listening and doing intake and understanding the priorities of the community, and then mirroring back and being good stewards in the sense of explaining the actions, the decision making, inviting that community input, and explaining what the board is doing about the concerns and priorities of the community. So I think a focus on constantly improving that communication would be excellent.
Thank you. The next question belongs to Tina Malhotra.
Hi, Wyatt. Thank you for joining us and thank you for interest. My question is really simple. Is there any particular agenda or issue that motivates you to serve on the Board of Education?
I thank you so much for the question. I think this is a really important point for me to emphasize. I do not bring a particular policy agenda or issue or an agenda for any type of radical change to this endeavor. What motivates me to do this is to sustain and strengthen the Ridgefield school system, to have a laser-like focus on the interests of our students, our teachers, our families, and our community, and to let that guide our good judgment on whatever issues come before the board, to listen, to collaborate, and again, to put politics to the side in serving the interests of students. Of course, we all have our own lens through which we see the world. These are human institutions. But I think it is really important. If you come away with nothing else tonight, I would ask that you come away with my promise that if chosen to serve, I will come to this wanting to listen, to roll up my sleeves and understand the nuances of the issues, to collaborate and confer, and to use my best judgment and experience to make decisions in the interest of students.
And the next question is from Selena Bell.
Hi, Wyatt. Thank you so much for being here and your interest. So my question is this, what are the current challenges facing education and school boards?
Yes, thank you, Selena, for the question. There are a number of challenges, and I think one that jumps to mind is the level of anxiety and the mental health challenges that our students face these days. It's a combination of pieces of the experience that are frankly just different today than when we were in school, whether it's social media, anxiety over high stakes testing, school safety, a myriad of factors that I think converge and create an atmosphere of anxiety that we need to confront head on, and we need to acknowledge, and we need to provide the resources, because it's something that will get in the way of learning. It will get in the way of building the kind of school communities that we need to build to give our kids the education that they so richly deserve. So I think I would underscore the mental health challenge. And I think as the adults in the community, we need to not only provide resourcing and tools to help students deal with those challenges, but to model ourselves the kind of balanced and healthful and mindful approach to these things as they come up.
Thank you. We just have a couple minutes left, no more questions, but we have an opportunity for you to tell us anything that you'd like us to know that was not covered by your letter of interest or your resume or your answers tonight.
I would just thank everyone again for the time and consideration, and I would underscore my enthusiasm and eagerness to take this on. I'm someone for whom a commitment to service is a core value. It's something that I've done throughout my life, and I've been itching to do here in Ridgefield since moving and putting roots down. And now when I look at Vivian, our 10-month-old daughter, talking to friends and neighbors that I meet at the rec center on our walks or in town, and describing my interest and my passion to serve and getting their encouragement and support, I know that the time is right. I hope that you think so as well, and I'm ready to do the hard work together to be successful and committed to the role.
Thank you very much. At this point, you're going to be whisked back into the waiting room, and we'll see you again in about a half an hour.
Thank you so much.
With candidate 3, there we go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear us?
Yes, clearly.
Terrific. So as I said at the beginning of the evening, we're each going to ask you one question. Each of us has asked the same question of each of the candidates tonight in the interest of fairness. We have about 15 minutes, but if we run long, we run long. And at the end, you'll have a few moments to cover anything that we have missed in our questioning tonight. So moving right into it, our first question of the evening is coming from Rachel Ruggieri.
Good evening, Divya. I'm Rachel. Welcome.
Thank you.
First question is, why do you want to be on the Board of Education? And what do you think will be your biggest challenge serving on the Board of Ed?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity and letting me express my interest in this role. Let me begin with the fact that I moved into Ridgefield from Simsbury, and my daughter joined Farmingville. So coming from a totally different cultural background, schooling, I had to learn everything from scratch. I did not know how the school system functioned over here. So I started volunteering, started learning how everything works. Then I started actively being a part of the PTA board. I did join as an art liaison, but in the past 2 years, I was the Board of Education advocacy member. The biggest challenge that I would think would be bringing across diverse opinions, bringing a consensus when there is diverse opinion, being able to, sit across the board, discuss, and still keep focus on the main issues, that would be the biggest challenge.
Thank you.
The next question will be coming from Amy Casey.
Hi, Divya.
Hi.
Thank you for being here with us tonight. My question is, what did you most enjoy and value in your current or your past community service?
I would say interacting with people from different backgrounds, learning more about what it is to, live, work in a new town, understand what are the opportunities available, the basic foundations of how to go about understanding your daily living, how to get your child into all the activities around town, and mostly through community services, how I made friends. I learned to interact, understand. Like I said, different opinions, not always all people have the same opinion. That is how you learn more and understand how you can work together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your next question will be coming from Thomas Collin.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us and for your interest. Question, where do you think that politics plays a role as a member of the Board of Ed?
I don't think politics should have any role, although we may have our own, personal preferences, opinions, our own stereotypes might color our decision making. But as a board member, I don't think politics has any role. It should be as neutral as possible, because at the end of the day, we are serving the student population and the community. So that should be our main focus.
Thank you.
Next up is a question from Sean McAvoy.
Good evening. So my question is, what do you see as the board's roles and responsibilities? And conversely, what work of the school district is not the board's role?
The Board of Education is basically the governing body of the school district. It is involved in the hiring process of the superintendent. It adopts the school budget. It implements the state policies, in the best interests of the student population. It shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day administration or the operations of the schools.
Thank you.
I have the next question. It's a couple parts. What do you see as both the strengths and weaknesses of this Board of Education? Do you think that the public understands the role of the BOE, or do they believe it to be different than what it actually is? And if so, in what ways?
So the strength of this board is we have the resources, the tools to work very efficiently in providing a very good quality education for the student population. The weakness, I would say, from personal experience, the only reason why I even accepted the role in the PTA board as a BOE advocacy member was because I didn't understand when I saw the BOE meetings outside of it. The information is very complex, it's very detailed, it's not in a very edible format for the average parent. So the dissemination of information should be more in a more palatable manner. It should be more easily understood rather than being so complex, and the visibility is not there for the parents if they're not part of the PTA. And even with the PTA, they have only a couple of general meetings, and if you do not take part in those meetings, understanding what the board does is very, very difficult. In any average parent, if you ask the Board of Education, would probably be, oh, this is the board which decides what the school system does. That's it. They do not actually understand what is involved in the process, even though it is telecast on YouTube. The social media aspect of it is there for easy access, but I doubt most parents are even viewing the meetings.
The next question will be asked by Tina Malhotra.
Hi, Divya. Thank you for your interest. My question is really simple. Is there any particular agenda or issue that motivates you to serve on this Board of Education?
Yes. So when I personally wanted to reach out to the schools or the school district, I felt that a certain population of the student community is addressed, their needs are addressed, but not all. In the case of my child, I wanted to see what possible opportunities she had in the field of STEM or other languages, and it was lack of information. I would say wanting to work on those agenda items would be one of my most important criteria, because I think we need an overall, whole child. The child should be able to express their interest. It doesn't matter whether it's sports, academics, whatever it may be, they should have the access to it.
And the next question will be asked by Selena Bell.
Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us. So my question's pretty simple too. What are the current challenges facing education and the school boards today that you think are pretty important?
I would say the first challenge is probably hiring the best possible staff to have as many talented, educators possible. The next would be utilizing the resources we have. We are very fortunate that in town that we have the resources to adopt whatever new tools or resources that we can provide for the children. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of other boards don't have the access to that. That is one of the biggest challenges, how we utilize our current resources and tools. How do we hire the best educators possible, especially with the pandemic coming and a lot of very qualified educators, moving out of town, resigning. So how we get the best possible staff for our children.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that is the last question we have for you. In the last few minutes here, is there anything that you would like us to know that was not covered in your letter of interest or your resume or your answers this evening?
My resume would speak for itself, because I do have a considerable amount of experience as a talent acquisition partner. I've been in the business of hiring people to see whether the labor force is properly skilled, educated, do they have the necessary qualifications. Based on that and the fact that I've moved around, relocated myself, and have lived in 3 other countries. And I also worked in a global relocation company. So I do understand the need for diverse opinions, diverse perspectives, and to work together based off those principles. And I would like to thank the whole board for giving me the opportunity to answer all your questions.
Thank you so much for meeting with us. Any moment now, you will be whisked back into the waiting room.
Okay.
And we will move into an executive session to discuss the candidacies.
Okay.
All right, John Mansfield, do you want to stick around here and hear a motion from Rachel?
Yep.
Okay. I move that the Board of Education convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing the appointment of an interim member to fill the vacancy on the board.
Rachel, do I have a second? Tina, all those in favor?